The change was not a shift, but a shattering. One moment, Jason was a king, arrogant, powerful, and whole. The next, he was a monster, his humanity locked behind a cage of fur, muscle, and gnawing hunger. The witch's cackle still echoed in his ears, even after 70 years. You will never know the touch of a woman, Lycan. Never again wear a man's skin. Unless, of course, you can find one who would kiss a beast. And who could ever love such a menacing thing? For 7 decades, King Brian, now only Jason the Rogue, had roamed the woods. He was a plague upon the land, a creature of pure destruction. He killed deer not for hunger, but for the savage release. He tore through any who dared cross his path, travelers, hunters, even other Lycans from distant packs who strayed too close. The demon of his curse was a constant, whispering torment in his mind, urging him to kill, to rend, to feel the hot spill of blood that momentarily silenced the agony of his existence. But tonight, the demon was quiet. It was her voice that did it. A simple melody, drifting through the pines like a silver thread. It was a human girl, kneeling by a stream, picking moon-kissed herbs and placing them in a small basket. Her song was not complex, but it was pure, a gentle hum that seemed to soothe the very air around her. Jason stood frozen in the deep shadows, a hulking silhouette of matted black fur and scarred muscle. The bloodlust that was his constant companion receded, replaced by something he had not felt in a lifetime: peace. It was a fragile, temporary respite, so delicate he feared a single snapped twig would shatter it. He watched her. The way the moonlight caught in her dark hair, the careful focus of her hands, the quiet contentment in her posture. She was utterly unaware of the monster lurking mere yards away, a monster whose claws were still caked with the blood of a recent kill. For the first time in 70 years, Jason did not feel the urge to charge. He felt an overwhelming need to listen, to let the sound of her voice wash over the festering wound of his soul. The demons inside him, for a few precious minutes, fell silent. When her basket was full, the girl stood, brushed off her simple dress, and began to walk back towards the edge of the woods, still humming that sweet, simple tune. An impulse, reckless and desperate, seized Jason. He could not let the peace end. He had to know where it lived. Moving with a silence that defied his massive size, he began to tail her. He kept to the deepest shadows, a ghost following a siren's song. Every few steps, she would pause, look up at the stars, and hum another line, and Jason would stop, his entire being focused on that sound. Finally, a small, warmly lit cottage came into view, nestled in a clearing just beyond the tree line. Smoke curled from its chimney, and the scent of baking bread, a scent he had almost forgotten, mingled with her herbal fragrance. She climbed the steps, opened the door, and the golden light from within spilled out, framing her for a moment before she disappeared inside. The door closed, and the woods were plunged back into their usual sounds, the rustle of night creatures, the whisper of the wind. But for Jason, the silence was now deafening. The demons began to stir again, their whispers returning. But now, he had an anchor, a location, a hope. He settled deep into the foliage opposite the cottage, his glowing amber eyes fixed on the glowing window. The girl's song was over, but the memory of it was a shield. King Brian was gone. Jason the Rogue was changing. And it was all because of the human girl in the cottage, who had, without knowing it, tamed the beast with nothing but a song. But, for Yulina, it was a different ballgame altogether. The warmth of the cottage she had carried with her from the woods evaporated the moment she stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume and simmering resentment. Finally! A sharp voice sliced through the room. Ophelia, her stepmother, stood with her arms crossed, her lips a thin, disapproving line. "Where have you been, you useless girl? Lazing about while we wait for our supper." Before Yulina could open her mouth to explain about the rare silver root that only bloomed under the full moon, Ophelia's hand shot out. The slap cracked through the small house, sharp and stinging. Yulina's head snapped to the side, tears of pain springing instantly to her eyes. "Don't bother lying," Ophelia hissed. "Your excuses are as tiresome as your presence." From the threadbare sofa, Wendy, her stepsister, smirked. She uncurled herself like a contented cat and sauntered over. Late again, Cinderella, she mocked, using the cruel nickname they'd given her. With a vicious yank, she pulled Yulina's hair, forcing her head back. I'm hungry. Make my dinner. And this time, add enough spices. If it's bland, you'll be sleeping with the rats in the basement again. Understood. She released Yulina with a shove. Now, go. You're blocking the view. Heart hammering, face burning, Yulina stumbled into the small, dark kitchen. The moment she was out of sight, the dam broke. Sobs racked her body as she leaned against the cold stone sink, her shoulders shaking. The peaceful respite of the woods felt like a lifetime ago. Outside, hidden by the deep night shadows, a pair of amber eyes burned with a fury hotter than any forge. Jason had seen it all. The slap, the hair-pulling, the cruel words. Every insult, every act of malice, had been a brand on his own soul. The demon inside him, usually screaming for blood, was now roaring in unison with his own rage. His claws dug deep furrows into the earth beneath him. A low, guttural snarl rumbled in his chest, a sound so full of menace that the night insects fell silent. He wanted to crash through the flimsy wooden wall. He wanted to tear the two cruel women limb from limb and paint the cottage with their blood. The image was vivid, satisfying. But then, he saw Yulina's face in his mind, not terrified as she was now, but peaceful as she sang by the stream. He held back. The effort was physical, a tremor running through his massive frame. He would not become the monster they thought she was. Not in her eyes. Never in her eyes. Inside, Yulina wiped her tears on her sleeve, her hands trembling as she reached for a pot. She began to chop vegetables, each slice a shaky, unrhythmic motion. As she worked, her voice, barely a whisper, escaped through her tears, a prayer. "Oh, goddess," she wept, her words meant for no one but the walls. "Please, please send someone. A savior. A friend. Anyone to save me from this life. I can't bear it anymore." Jason heard it. The desperate, broken whisper carried through the night air straight to his hypersensitive ears. The snarl died in his throat. The demon of his curse still whispered, but now it had a new target. The girl's prayer was not just a plea, it was a command. King Brian, the man buried deep within the beast, understood duty. And Jason, the rogue, understood protection. He didn't move from his post. He simply watched, a silent, menacing guardian in the dark. The two women in the other room had no idea that their every move was now being observed by a creature for whom they were less than prey. And the girl crying in the kitchen had no idea that her prayer had been answered not by a goddess, but by the most terrifying beast in the woods, who had just decided, with a single-minded certainty, that he was her savior. The fight between his rage and his devotion for the girl raged in Jason's eyes. Finally, with a tremendous shudder, he lowered his arm. The murderous tension left his body, replaced by a protective curl as he looked down at Yulina. "You cannot stay here," he rumbled. "I know," Yulina whispered, her voice firming with resolve. She looked from Orphilia's terrified face to Wendy's unconscious form. "I'll go with you." Jason shook his massive head. "My home is a cave. It is dark. It is cold. It is no place for you." "It is a place with you," Yulina said, her hand finding his. "And that makes it a home. I'm not afraid." As they turned to leave through the shattered window, Wendy stirred. The reality of a life of chores without her slave dawned on her. "Wait. You can't take her," she whimpered, struggling to her feet. Jason didn't even turn fully. He simply looked over his shoulder and unleashed a single, short, bone-rattling growl. The sound was so primal, so full of promised violence, that a dark stain spread instantly across the front of Wendy's dress. She sank back to the floor, sobbing in terror and shame. Without another word, Jason helped Yulina through the broken window and into the dark woods, leaving the broken house and its broken inhabitants behind. Hours later, when the cottage was silent except for their ragged breathing, Wendy wiped her face. "Mother, we have to get her back." "I can't. I can't do all this work. Ophelia, her own fear hardening into a venomous plot, nodded slowly. A cruel smile twisted her lips. That was no actor, you fool. That was a spirit guide. A beast she's conjured to protect her. She stood up, brushing splinters from her dress. But every spell can be broken. I will contact my friend, the witch who lives in the Blackwood Mountains. If Yulina has a beast, we'll simply get a witch to overpower it. The cave, once a cold, lonely hollow, had been transformed. Furs lined the stone floor, a small, carefully tended fire crackled in a pit, and the air smelled of roasting meat and the wildflowers Yulina had arranged near the entrance. For the first time in 70 years, the space felt like a home. Jason, though still a hulking Lycan in form, found his humanity reawakening day by day. He would return from hunts not just with game, but with handfuls of sweet berries or rare, succulent fruits he remembered from his youth. He'd watch, a quiet rumble of contentment in his chest, as Yulina cooked, her sweet songs filling the cavern. She was happier than she had ever been, free from fear and cruelty. And Jason? He was simply happy to have a friend, a voice to answer the crushing silence of decades. One evening, as the stars began to pepper the sky, Yulina was singing a particularly beautiful, haunting melody her mother had taught her. Jason sat by the fire, his eyes closed, simply listening, the peace so profound it felt fragile. The fragility shattered in an instant. A guttural howl echoed from outside, followed by others. Before Jason could react, a group of snarling werewolves, not rogues, but disciplined pack warriors, burst into the cave. And behind them, her eyes glowing with malevolent green energy, stood Orphilia's friend, the witch from the Blackwood Mountains. "Take the girl," the witch shrieked. "The beast is mine." Chaos erupted. Jason became a whirlwind of protective fury, meeting the attackers head-on. Claws met claws, fangs snapped at fur. He was a king defending his queen, and his strength was terrible to behold. He fought with a precision and rage he hadn't known he possessed, dispatching the werewolves one by one. In the fray, he saw Orphilia and Wendy, who had followed the witch, sneaking towards a terrified Yulina. Orphilia grabbed her arm. "You're coming home, you ungrateful wretch," she spat. A red haze descended over Jason's vision. With a roar that shook the cave walls, he broke through his last opponent and lunged. He swiped a massive claw, and Wendy screamed as her hand was severed from her wrist. He didn't pause. His fury focused on Orphilia. He grabbed the shrieking woman and, with a final, decisive snap, ended her threat forever. Panting, bleeding from multiple wounds, he turned to Yulina. But the fight was not over. The witch, seeing her allies fallen, uttered a final, venomous curse aimed directly at Yulina. A bolt of dark energy shot from her hands. Yulina's eyes widened, and she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The witch cackled and fled into the night, but Jason didn't care. The world narrowed to the still form of the girl on the cave floor. He stumbled to her side, gathering her into his arms. A howl of pure, agonizing despair tore from his throat, a sound of a soul being ripped in two. He held her to his bleeding chest, rocking back and forth. The curse, the decades of torment, the brief happiness, it was all being stolen from him. "No," he begged, his voice a broken rasp. "Please, no." He looked at her pale, peaceful face. He had lost everything once. He could not lose her. Driven by a love deeper than any curse, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was a kiss of farewell, of desperation, a final, hopeless prayer. But then, he felt it. Her lips moved against his. A soft, responding pressure. Her arms, weak but determined, lifted and wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, returning the kiss with a passion that stole his breath. As they kissed, a blinding white light erupted from where their lips met. A searing heat, not of pain but of purification, washed over Jason. He felt his body contort, not with the agony of the shift, but with a gentle, flowing sensation. The heavy fur receded, the massive bones reshaped, the claws retracted. When the light faded, Yulina broke the kiss, gasping for air. Her eyes fluttered open, and they were no longer looking at a beast. She was looking at a man. A tall, powerfully built man with kind, tired brown eyes and a strong jaw. His face was etched with the wisdom and pain of his long years, but he was undeniably, breathtakingly human. And handsome. "Jason," she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached up to touch his cheek. Jason looked down at his own hands, human hands, then back at Yulina, alive and awake in his arms. A joy so immense it was painful erupted within him. He let out a shout of laughter and swept her up into the air, swinging her around. "You did it," he cried, his voice, his real, human voice, rich with emotion. "Yulina, you broke the curse. Your kiss, your true love's kiss." He set her down gently, holding her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears of joy and shock. He dropped to one knee, his brown eyes earnest and full of a love that had waited 70 years to be spoken. "Yulina," King Brian said, the man finally whole. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen?" Yulina looked at the man who had been her monster, her protector, her friend, and now, her savior. There were no doubts. Only a future. "Yes," she breathed, her smile brighter than the sun. "Yes, Jason. 1,000 times yes." And in the cave that had been their sanctuary, surrounded by the evidence of the battle they had won together, the cursed king and the gentle girl began their happy ever after, their love story finally complete. The news spread through the kingdom like wildfire, carried on the excited howls of scouts and the whispers of the wind. The king has returned. The palace, which had stood silent and leaderless for 7 decades, was now a beacon of light and music. Banners bearing the crest of the royal house, a majestic wolf silhouetted against a full moon, fluttered from every tower. The grand courtyard, once overgrown with weeds of neglect, was now filled with tables laden with roasted meats, sweet fruits, and frothing ale. The entire pack was there, their faces alight with a joy they had long forgotten. At the center of it all stood Jason. No longer the menacing rogue of the woods, but King Brian, returned to his rightful throne. He stood tall and proud, dressed in royal vestments of deep blue and silver, his brown eyes, once shadowed by a beast's torment, now clear and filled with a hard-won peace. But his gaze rarely strayed from the woman beside him. Yulina, his Luna, was a vision. She wore a gown of moonlight white silk, embroidered with silver threads that mimicked the patterns of frost on leaves. A crown of winter berries and polished moonstone, much like the one she had worn in the woods, rested upon her brow. The girl who had drawn water from the stream now stood as a queen, her gentle strength radiating throughout the courtyard. The ancient mating ceremony was performed under the open sky. As they spoke their vows, promising to lead the pack together with strength and compassion, a unified howl rose from every Lycan present, a powerful harmonious sound that shook the very foundations of the mountains. It was a song of acceptance, of loyalty, and of a new beginning. The celebration lasted for days. There was feasting, dancing, and tales told of the king's long absence, now reframed as a legendary trial that had led him to his true Luna. Jason moved among his people, no longer a distant, feared figure, but a king who understood hardship and valued kindness. Yulina, by his side, listened to their stories, her compassion instantly winning the hearts of all who met her. In the years that followed, the kingdom entered a golden age. Under Jason's strong, just rule and Yulina's wise, gentle counsel, the pack prospered. They forged peace with neighboring realms, and the woods, once a place of fear, became a symbol of the king's enduring love and the Luna's healing song. They had children, a strong-willed son with his father's courage and a daughter with her mother's soothing voice and kind heart. The family often walked in the woods together, and Jason would point out the very stream where his life had truly begun again. King Brian and Queen Yulina ruled for many long, peaceful years. Their story became the foundation of the kingdom's lore, a timeless legend of a beast redeemed by love, a curse broken by courage, and how the purest heart in the most humble of homes can prove worthy of a crown. They lived, loved, and led, a testament to the power of true love, forever remembered as the rightful king and his worthy Luna.